I was discovering this very real problem of being unbanked. Now, mind you, this is being unbanked in the US, right? It was very short-lived. I got a bank account. I got things cleaned up. But this philosophy of money thing really stuck with me. And then as I found Bitcoin, it kind of clicked for me, like what crypto is. Like the existence of something of value outside of the US dollar.
GM, welcome to another episode of the Solfate podcast, where we talk with builders and founders in the Solana ecosystem. Had another great one today. We had Dana from Step Finance.
Dana from Step Finance. Hopefully you all know Step Finance. Step Finance is,
It's a household name.
Nick and I, it's a great name. It's a household name. I use it daily, right? It's basically a dashboard that compiles all of your DeFi activities, which is no small feat. And we talked to Dana.
Not at all.
Dana is, I guess we didn't ask him his actual title, but he's basically the architect over there, right? Head of the engineering and does a phenomenal job being able to pull together all this information, wrangle it, and surface it in a comprehensible way. I first met Dana. I think we first met actually on a call when I was bugging him about some stuff for the Solana course that we were making back in the day. But first met him in person.
Good course. Can recommend.
Can recommend. Yes. Go to Solana, developers.solana.com or solana.com.
Solana.com/developers/courses.
There we go. /developer/courses. Anyway, it was a great chat with Dana. He's definitely an OG, like for real. Started working in Solana in 2020. Came over full time. He told us all about his story, which is a super, super cool story. So definitely recommend. Let's jump in. Before we do that, though, just a quick shout out to Phantom. Phantom is the preferred wallet of the Solana Solfate ecosystem. I almost said Solana ecosystem. But we love partnering with Phantom. Also, if you need any development work done, reach out to me and my dev shop Unboxed has got you covered. But with that, Nick, let's dig into the episode.
Let's go. Nothing in this podcast is or should be considered financial advice. Any opinions and thoughts expressed are solely those of the individual. They do not represent the opinions of any entity. Enjoy.
Before you hopped on, Nick and I were talking about how you are one of the OG builders in the Solana space. And so, of course, we want to talk Step and we want to talk like Step v3, that kind of stuff. But we would be remiss if we didn't cover a little bit of like your story as well. So I'm wondering if we can start there and maybe you just tell us like, how did you get into Solana? Maybe a little bit of before, so there's some context, and then how you got into Solana. And if it happens to segue into like, Step stuff specifically, great. But, maybe just let you do a little intro on who you are and where you come from.
Sure. So I'm Dana. I work with Step Finance now. My entry into the crypto space is kind of a fun story. So going back to 2013, obviously there was no Solana. What was there? There was Bitcoin. It was an interesting time in my life. I was struggling with an alcohol addiction that I had gone deep down the path of addiction to the point of homelessness. This is after a 20-year career in enterprise application development. But I end up in a homeless shelter, and what happens in a homeless shelter is you have a whole lot of time to read stuff, right? And I found Bitcoin. I just stumbled upon Bitcoin. I don't know why I didn't find it earlier. I was probably too busy drinking, but I find Bitcoin, and it's at this time in my life where I had destroyed my financial life and my banking relationships and everything. So it was a neat, I was having firsthand experience at being underbanked, right? Like I couldn't open a bank account because of debts. And I was in this weird spot in life where I couldn't save money, but I wanted a place to save money. And I was discovering this very real problem of being unbanked. Now, mind you, this is being unbanked in the US, right? It was very short-lived. I got a bank account. I got things cleaned up. But this philosophy of money thing really stuck with me. And then as I found Bitcoin, it kind of clicked for me, like what crypto is. Like the existence of something of value outside of the US dollar and something that can be instantly transferred anywhere around the world, that sort of thing. So I went deep down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. I became a believer. Back then, Bitcoin was like $200. Like I said, I was homeless. I was not rich. So, I would not be sitting here today if I had a bunch of money and loaded up on Bitcoin. But it is part of my story because I did start investing heavily in Bitcoin in 2014 through today. I set up a DCA bi-weekly that I've been doing ever since. And so that was my entry to crypto in general. But then Ethereum came around, right? 2016, 17 was really the big time of Ethereum. And I looked deep into Ethereum and just thought it was garbage because of the slow block times. Like I couldn't envision how this was useful with such limited block space and limited block times. And I hate to brag, but I nailed it, right? Like I totally skipped Ethereum because I thought it was trash. It wasn't just that though. I hadn't quite envisioned what like a token was. I was such a Bitcoin believer that I couldn't really click what Ethereum was trying to do. Years later, a friend got me into Solana, pointed to it, hey, check this one out. We got this group of buddies that, investigate different tokens and stuff. And I looked into Solana and was like, wow, this is legit. Like, this is like Ethereum, but the architecture and design, while incredibly complex, makes sense. Like, this does high speed stuff. And at the time, Serum already existed. To give you a time reference, it was around December 2020. And so I became a big Solana believer. I started writing on-chain programs just to tinker with stuff. This was before Anchor. I was working on a bunch of silly little pet projects, but I hung out in the Solana Discord a lot back then because I was learning. There was a dude there. You might have heard of him, Jordan Prince. Him and I would chat or whatever, but he noticed that I was helping out a lot of people in the Solana Discord, and I knew what I was talking about, which was pretty rare back then. Like this stuff's complex, right? The term chewing glass hadn't even been invented yet. And so he hooked me up with a recruiter, and I thought it was like, I'm working at the time. Now, mind you, this is like 10 years after my first discovery of Bitcoin. So I'm not homeless anymore. I'm working on a trading floor for T. Rowe Price. And I didn't think this silly, goofy crypto world that we live in could support the salary of a enterprise architect, right? So I met with the recruiter. Turns out they can. They were able to match my salary. A couple different projects I interviewed with, one of them being Step Finance. And, I kind of clicked with George and Aaron, the co-founders there, and joined their team as like, employee number 5 or 6 or something like that back then. And, that was the start of it. There were some pet projects before then. Like I worked on Solana Dino. I don't know if you heard of it. Total OG meme coin. Like we kind of captured the very first wave of meme coin, but it was an engineering project to help me and some other guys learn Solana. And it worked. My buddy Kobe that worked with me on that now works for MarginFi.
Hey there, it's Nick. Quick intermission on the episode. If you're enjoying this episode, drop us a review in whatever podcast app you're already listening to, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. It would really, really help us out. We're trying to grow the show, trying to spread the good word of Solana and all the cool things and builders that are here in the ecosystem. And speaking of YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube, we publish all of our episodes there. Don't forget to subscribe. It really helps us out too. And let's go ahead and get back to the episode.
Nice. Yeah. Nice. That's way cool. I think it's also I love how like the Solana origin part there stems from you just lurking in Discord and being helpful, right? Like
it's wild, isn't it? Yeah.
I think so many people. I feel like I've heard that so many times from people who were in, or who I consider OGs. It was just like they stuck around and were helpful, and because of that, we're given opportunities, right? I think often people, are so fixated on like, what am I going to do? Trying to plan things out exactly, that they forget that if you just, just be helpful and like make relationships, things will happen that you don't expect. You had no idea that like Solana even could support your salary. And then boom, all of a sudden Jordan, got you connected to the right people, and it worked because you were just trying to be helpful. And I love that. I think, hopefully, I think that probably resonates with Nick too, since he's like a DevRel, and that's like what he's trying to encourage people to do.
This is what I tell people to do. This is like half my job description of like telling other people to be helpful, not just telling them, trying to convince them to be either helpful going 0 to 1 or be more helpful to the ecosystem, especially if someone's trying to like break into the industry, whatever that means. Like if someone is listening and you're trying to get a job in the industry, specifically in the Solana space, in the Solana ecosystem, just be helpful. People will notice. I guarantee it. We as Solana Foundation are constantly looking at those people and trying to direct them to like companies that they might be a good fit for. So be helpful.
Absolutely. And I think being helpful is kind of a side effect of being passionate, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I was being helpful not because I wanted to get a job or to break into the industry. I was being helpful because I was really enjoying myself and I wanted to bring other people in. And that's so key to making it in this space, is actually like really being passionate about this stuff and being energetic about it and being interested.
Yeah. And unfortunately you end up with a lot of people in the space who, and not to knock on like wanting to make money as being a motivator. We all want to make money. But I think there are plenty of people in the space who are here exclusively for that reason.
The incentive spectrum.
And that's not quite like sufficient for that passion you're describing, right?
That's
it's like
right.
you gotta actually be interested in it for real. And if you're not, maybe this isn't your space, and that's okay. Like there are other ways to other places you can be passionate and also be rewarded for it. But
and there's angles to that passion. If you're just into making money, like you can go a trader route. You don't have to become a Solana engineer to flip meme coins and do trade analysis, right? You just draw some bubbles and sticks on a graph.
And a bunch of us who are engineers and builders of various kinds, have probably kicked ourselves once or twice for like not trading more when people are like wildly successful and we feel like they're less involved. But it is what it is. It's like we get some value from.
I ain't got time for that crap.
Exactly.
I wish I like big numbers, but man, I'm busy.
What does help out us engineers though are a lot of the airdrop programs, because we are some of the first to tinker with new prototypes, especially at Step Finance, right? Like a new prototype comes out, we got a whole bucket of test wallets we're testing with. Who do you think gets airdropped? Our test wallets.
I love that for you.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So speaking of Step, you mentioned that like when you interviewed, you connected with the co-founders. I am curious, like what is it about Step's mission that resonated with you, right? Like what, aside from the personal connection where it's like, I like these guys, what about Step, the project, what the company's trying to achieve resonated with you enough to where you're like, you know what? Yeah, I am going to jump into this Solana thing that, full time, that I weeks ago didn't know, could support a salary like mine. And, that's a little bit of a leap in 2020. Like, I'm not gonna lie, that's kind of ballsy at that time.
It was, and part of me wonders if new people, doing the same thing I did, converting from enterprise into or whatever, right? It doesn't have to be enterprise, but converting from a traditional job into a crypto job. For me, it was terrifying. Like, it didn't feel real. Like, I don't know the co-founders. Like, I hadn't met them in person. It could be a total scam, right? Like, what if they don't pay me? What if they're paying me in their token and they dump it? That sort of stuff. And it was a great unknown, and it did take a lot of like trust to jump into the industry, which wasn't as mature back then. I feel like it's a lot more mature now, but I also think people joining it now probably still feel the same way, because so much of it is non-formalized, I guess. These aren't like, I've only worked for US large employers, and there's tax documents and, employee rights and protections and all that. And maybe some jobs in crypto still do W-2s and all that if they're US based, but I know a lot of them don't, and they'll just pay you in token and you got to figure out the rest. That part was really, really scary for me. But at the same time, back to your original question, what is it about Step? This was a group of people that were just as passionate about me, about all these silly DeFi products and bringing the world of DeFi to life, not by necessarily writing their own DeFi protocols, but by building an interface that allows everyone to see all their DeFi stuff at once. Like, that resonated big with me, because that's what I was doing at the time. I think that's what a lot of us were doing. Radium and Orco were brand new. We were trying out these products. We had positions all over the place, positions we forgot about and lost. Like, how many times have you gone to Step and found $1,000 laying under a rock, right? So that's really what resonated with me, was just that the team kind of had involvement with all of the rest of the ecosystem. Nice.
So Step was that even back then. It sounds like it's been pretty consistent in terms of its goals and ambitions.
Yep. We've done a couple little side ventures into similar products. As far as the core Step Finance dashboard, that's what started it all. Step Token was one of the first tokens to launch. It was part of the early Radium fusion pools. It pumped our token. This was before I started, when they had a token, but I mean, it shot to $1. It was nuts and everything. People still love to point out how much Step has dropped in price, but that's a whole nother story. But yeah, that was the original product. The original product was the dashboard, and we've tried to keep that core focus on the dashboard. At the same time, we now have, I think, 6 different business lines that all now fall under something called the Step Foundation. That includes Solana All-Stars, which you may have heard of. That's our underbanked country onboarding program, where we have, I can't speak too much to it, and I don't want to get it wrong, but we hold weekly events in Venezuela, Argentina, Turkey, Nigeria, with teams that just spread the word of crypto.
Nice.
And then we also have Solana Floor, our news team, which is also part of Step Finance.
I always forget that Solana Floor is part of Step Finance. I know it, but I forget it frequently, especially with the recent rebrand of Solana Floor, the new logo. It's it's not using the same Step colors. I totally forgot that it was part of it. But All Stars is great. We should get Thep on for an episode.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely have Thep on to talk more about All Stars. I don't want to misrepresent the amazing work she's doing over there. And she can speak a little bit about how it is as a more recent hire into the crypto space, because she just joined Step full time 6 months ago.
Oh, okay. Nice. I didn't realize it was that recent.
She's been with us for years, but in a part-time kind of community moderator role. She came on
because it's I've always associated her Twitter account with Step in my mind. So.
Same.
Yeah. Way cool. So Solana Floor, Solana All-Stars, there's obviously the dashboard. You mentioned that there were 6. There's also staking, right? Is that part of the token, or is it
Well, the Step staking is kind of part of the dashboard, but it really just represents Step in general. It's man, I don't want to use the wrong word. I'm describing what it is here for tax reasons, but it very much just represents Step as a whole.
Okay.
And cool. Staking is a way to get the revenue that Step's generating from all the different business lines.
Yeah. Cool. Got it. No, that's way cool. I'll have to dig in a little bit more to some of those other, product lines and see what, see where they fit with my interests. The dashboard itself, though, is huge for me. I am always like curious about the business model there, because I think a lot of people are like, oh, it's just a website, and don't realize how much goes into actually making that work. Right. Like it's so much more than just a website. Like it's such a complicated product to pull all of these many different protocols together and like provide an aggregate number. It's wild. And so I am kind of curious, like, where does the revenue come from for the dashboard? Because it's obviously free to me to just go on the dashboard and plug in my addresses and like see everything about the state of my crypto portfolio. And it's amazing, but I'm not paying for it.
Sure. Yeah. I think it's the traditional model of build it first and figure out how to make money with it later. That was kind of the case for a while. Going back in history, we've had a couple different things to make money. We actually used to have step swaps. We had a internal swap aggregator that I wrote. It was probably the first aggregator on Solana, but we kind of shut all that down. We have no on-chain stuff anymore. Jupiter came along, and we wanted to focus on the dashboard, not on this other stuff we were doing. But we, for a long time, we had fees on our swaps. We've removed those more recently because what we've discovered is most of the revenue we get from our validator. We started running our own validator. We're using the Sanctum program, so we have StepSol. Encouraging our users to stake with us makes us more money than a 0.1% on a swap. So we've recently made swap fees free. We're finding that running a validator and leveraging our outreach to stake to that validator is a win-win. So I think we have the validator with the most number of stakers because of our huge outreach. Now, it's not the most stake, but it is the highest number of distinct stakers.
That's really cool.
That's a good fun fact.
Yeah.
That's also, it's fine. I've heard a lot of people talk about the model of sort of the business model of have people stake with your validator and then you provide them a separate service. It's interesting to hear you say that that's such a big portion of the Step business model, because I don't know that I'm not aware of another company that sort of does that well enough to where it works. So that's like really cool to hear that it can work. I think everybody wishes they could just like spin up a validator. Unfortunately, you do need quite a bit of stake for it to be profitable. So it's not the type of thing like I could spin up a validator today, but it would not be profitable today. I would have to drive a lot of traffic in that direction and get a lot of stakers. So it does make a lot of sense for like a dashboard service like this, because there are so many eyes on Step regularly to where you can sort of just direct a little bit to like, hey, do you like what we do? Stake with us.
Yeah. And some other ways.
It also kind of dives into what we were all talking about earlier. It's like provide value and good, useful things to the ecosystem, generally free of charge. Like if you provide value, you build credibility. And then when you do things like, hey, start a validator, stake with us, you've already built, you as a person and you as Step has already built this force and this recognizability within the ecosystem. People are like, oh yeah, totally trust them. They've been doing great stuff. Like I want to keep supporting them doing what they're already doing. It's the exact same thing. Provide value to the ecosystem, and generally people get rewarded for that.
Yeah, you're right. Yep. We do have some other lines of revenue. We have a transaction history product that does have a fee associated with it. I think it's like $20 per wallet.
I forgot about that. I have actually used that. So it's interesting that I forgot about that.
Yeah. So that gives you like a CSV download of instead of like raw transaction data, it's just, here's the tokens that moved in your account. And it's incredibly useful for tax reasons. We also have, third parties integrating with that as well. At like a more enterprise API usage level. that use us as part of their tax product. So it's kind of a B2B thing we have going on.
I think that provides a good segue to, I think I alluded to it a minute ago, that like there's so much engineering work that goes into making this dashboard viable. We talked about it at Mountain DAO this past summer. You sort of did like a little workshop there that I found fascinating. We don't have to go too in the weeds, but our audience tends to be relatively technical.
Sure.
I think we can talk in the weeds a little bit about what are you guys doing under the hood, and how are you aggregating this data, and why is it so challenging? First, some of the less technical listeners may not realize why it's so challenging. In their mind, it's like, you do this thing and it was simple when I did it. Why isn't it simple to like look retroactively and understand what it was that I did?
Sure. So Step Finance right now is in the process of moving from what I'll call the old way to the new way. And let me go over the old way first, because I think that's what most people are familiar with. And that would be, a protocol comes out, say Orca, and you want to look up positions for that. Typically, they have an SDK that you can use. And you use that SDK, you look up positions. And then you just have to plug that into the dashboard on the back end to do that. Works great. You have like your Orca positions showing on a page. And then along comes Radium, and then along comes, let's say, 50 other portfolio or products that you want to integrate into this dashboard. And that's when the problems really come up, because as everyone knows that tries to integrate 50 different SDKs into the same program, you have versioning problems right off the bat. Everybody's using different versions of everything, and it just won't run if you attempt to do that. So we ended up, most of the time, we don't even use SDKs because of this problem. Instead, we have to read through the SDKs, see what the SDKs are doing, and kind of recreate that, copy paste some code, that sort of thing. And you end up with your own like lightweight SDK to read a protocol. So you have to kind of do that for every protocol that you onboard, create an optimized solution for doing things. You also run into some problems with Git program account calls. As we know, calling an RPC with calling an RPC with a GPA with like a filter that isn't indexed, it's a nightmare, right? So we started having more and more problems with that over time. But we work with Triton, and Brian Long and team over there do a great job. Their Steamboat indexing solution has helped us a lot to just automatically create high-speed ways to get data back from those GPAs. But while you're doing all this, you got 50 protocols you've integrated into the dashboard. Now 20 of them have already retired. They don't even exist anymore. Another 10 of them are on V2 already. And suddenly you realize you've got this nightmare of maintaining all these old integrations with new integrations, and everything's changing at the same time. And it's extremely hard to keep up with. even as consumers, like as someone using DeFi, it's impossible to keep up with all the changes that are going on. And, this token over here in this protocol needs upgraded to this new token because they made this new bucket you got to use when you do this thing. And it's crazy.
Well, it's funny. You mentioned earlier, like developers being a prime target for airdrop programs because they like tinker with all these new things. But there's so many new things that even with that, there's so like I miss so much because there are so many changes and things all the time. And as your portfolio grows, you start to think about, if you're in the US or somewhere where you feel like maybe you need to be more conscious of taxes, you start to think about, taxable transactions and those kinds of things. And maybe you don't do unnecessary swaps or those kinds of things because you don't want to get locked into anything. Obviously, everyone does their taxes a little bit differently and has a different approach, but I err on the conservative side.
Absolutely.
So what changed with the updated version? That's the old way of how you were doing it.
It is.
What's different? Like what is the unlock that hopefully is easier to maintain for all of you?
Right, right. Well, I don't know about that. I don't think anything makes this easy to maintain. Integrating,
Not easy to maintain, but hopefully better in other ways.
yeah. So it unlocks some really, really cool stuff. But let me back up and talk about what got us there. Right, the world of Geyser opened up to us, and some may have heard of Geyser, but it's basically a plugin interface to run on a node that is able to act in real time on transactions that are hitting the validator. And the most common use case for this is just, filter it for programs you're interested in and send the transactions out, gRPC, RabbitMQ, whatever it is. And we decided to launch an analytics product to kind of complement our dashboard that shows, if you're looking at the farm that you're in, what's the historical APR of that farm, that sort of stuff. And then starting to gather time series data led us down the path of developing a Geyser plugin to start receiving real-time information from the chain. And it was at that point that we this was about a year ago, a little over a year ago, we took a step back and realized what is the dashboard really doing when you go to it, right? It's making, I think our dashboard at the time made about 400 RPC calls just for one dashboard page load, most of them being get multiple accounts and get program accounts. What is it doing? If you could summarize, what are all of these calls doing? They're just getting state, right? They're getting the state of everything related to my wallet. So what would it take to just receive and record state updates for every account on all of Solana in real time and index it in a very specific way, not just account data? You see a lot of indexers out there that are just, put all the binary account data in a table. Instead, what if we parsed the DeFi related information out of there and stored it in very specific DeFi tables? And that's the direction Step's headed now. We're not there yet. We're working on it. It's really, really hard. But what does this mean? This means our database that we're maintaining has everyone's Orca positions, everyone's Radium positions. Every farm that exists is in our database, not as raw account binary data, but as an object called farm. And here's its historical state. And here's every user that's ever been in that farm and that sort of stuff. And so this gives us a holistic view that supports both our analytics product and our dashboard product. Now, you could ask the question, how many users are in each farm on Orca? I could show you that. Our old dashboard could not, because it was very specific to look up the state of this wallet. Whereas now we're maintaining a database that has the state of every wallet for every protocol. And that becomes a powerful tool both for our analytics, our dashboard, and our newsroom, right? For research.
Because you now have it historically as well, at least from whenever you start, parsing that.
Exactly. And the best preview of this feature, if you are on the Step Finance V3 page, you can click on one of your token accounts and you can see the balance history of that token account.
Oh, I haven't even
with
tried that.
The graph on it of the value, which also incorporates the price. So you have a price and token over time, which is
nice.
Like a tiny little preview that we're not even talking about much, but that's where we're headed, because that exact same graph is going to be possible for every position you have. Your lending positions, your perps, your everything. You can have this over time graph of everything your portfolio's been in. So it's like P&L, but you don't want to call it P&L. It's more of a
historical
wallet history, right? Like portfolio history.
That database has got to be pretty big.
It is. There's another
what's the infra you're using there?
Sure. So we started with Postgres Timescale DB. Mm-hmm. We have officially just outgrown that. I
bet.
I can't do it there anymore. It's costing me too much. I think our drive is now up to 4 terabytes running on AWS and EBS drive. of 4 terabytes costs a fortune. And of course, we have a test environment, so I got to double everything. We've just a couple months ago moved on to ClickHouse.
I was going to ask. I was going to assume that you went over to ClickHouse. Yeah. Everyone seems to be transitioning over. It seems to be a lot cheaper on the infra.
Yeah, definitely cheaper, but it's very different. It's not just an RDBMS. I'm an RDBMS guy for the last 30 years. It requires a lot more thinking and architecting these tables and things that you're creating. But when done right, the performance is just incredible.
That migration must have sucked so bad.
It absolutely is going to suck. We're not done.
Okay.
I'm in the thick of it. Like the holidays are going to disrupt me.
Salt in the wound here.
Yeah, thanks for that. I do anticipate it sucking royally.
That's all I could think of was like, oh, you've got this massive database that you feel like you've outgrown. And so you're going to go use something different, but you're not just going to throw all this away either.
Yeah, I got to move it all over and maintain the real-time stream of 4,000 DeFi operations per second that we receive. That
is, I mean, for folks listening who are less technical, like this is why engineers get paid what they get paid and why they push back when you ask, like, can this be done in 3 weeks? Right. Is because like, This is an insane thing to solve while having to maintain like perfect uptime. Right. And just like keep things coming in and not miss a beat.
It's really
I'm
hard.
Hearing this and I'm just like, holy shit, I'm glad I'm not Dana right now.
So, hey, I got a really good engineering nerd story to throw in. While all this is going on, just last month, we started getting errors in our test environment with inserts not working into some account table. We look into it. I originally created this account table with a 32-byte account ID, and we maxed it out. So we hit I32 max of our account IDs that we're indexing.
Wow.
And so I have to upgrade this to a 64-bit. And there's trillions of rows of data that need upgraded. So I got a guy working on that right now. We were able to delay this entire thing. This makes it funny too, by switching the sequence to run in reverse and start at -1. So we doubled our key space because I was using a signed int.
Nice. That's funny. Oh, man.
But that's how much data we're dealing with. We maxed out the integer space of a 32-bit int storing accounts in a database because my dumbass made it a 32-bit.
Yeah, I
lesson be learned. Always start with a 64-bit.
It's so obvious. You know how things are. You start with a prototype, right? Everything starts as a prototype, and prototype goes to production.
Yep.
I'm just saying. Metaplex V2 was shipped as a hello world, so they like the original Metaplex. I mean, it was token metadata shipped as a hello world program to mainnet, so they could never expand it. So they had to rip out all the V2 instructions because they were like, well, we want to add these V3 things.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because like I started my software development journey doing iOS development back in like 2014. And even in 2014, mobile phones had enough capacity that like Swift sort of defaults to these like abstracted number types. You can go in and specify an int 64 or whatever, but it's sort of just like an int type. And it works because like you don't really need to optimize, and because of that you don't end up in these situations. But then shifting, in 2020 and 2021 into like on-chain development, all of a sudden I go from like a very not resource constrained environment to the most resource constrained environment, and probably started over indexing on like, oh, well, let's make this number type. Let's make this an I8 instead of an I16, like those kinds of things. And then backing off to what you're describing, which is not on chain. It's like you're your head's kind of stuck in both places. And I get
it's
making
true.
that.
Yeah.
I get doing that because you're like, yeah, I'm trying to save on resources. But then later you realize, oh shoot, we're dealing with a database that we want to grow forever. And so like, that's not going to work.
Yeah. And in moving to ClickHouse, we don't have those IDs at all. We're just using the 32 byte accounts as the IDs, right? So problem solved.
Got it.
Nice.
Pub keys. Your pub key is the ID.
Have you? So it sounds like you've already you're well into this journey of shifting things into ClickHouse. What? Because there was a ClickHouse. I'm trying to remember the organization. There was a ClickHouse presentation at Breakpoint this past year. I guess this year, current year, and I'm curious, like most people hadn't really heard of ClickHouse. They were definitely not familiar on the Solana ClickHouse specific things. Do you have any like pro tips that you've already learned? Like what are the foot guns that you've already run into that you want to tell people about if they're interested in looking into ClickHouse some more to do Solana specific things?
Sure. I would just say don't go into it just plowing along, even if you're an RDBMS expert, just running in there and thinking you know how it works and you know how to do it and you'll figure the details out later. You got to dive into the docs. You got to understand how this thing's being stored on disk, how indexes work, because they're not the same. You have like these skip indexes, but they're not related to what you would consider an index in the normal world. For that, you'd use something like a projection, which is a whole new like thing for an RDBMS guy. Like, what's this projection thing? It's kind of like a materialized view of the same table, or you could just call it an index. Like it behaves like an index. And there's other little things like materialized views are not the same. I don't even know why they call them that. They behave like triggers. So really, like everything is so radically different that don't skip the docs. You can't skip the docs. You're going to spend a week or two, to understand how it works if you want to do it right.
Don't skip the docs. I love docs.
They're good docs too. If you're serious and you love docs, those are some good docs.
Okay, I'll have to go take a look at them. We're cooking up some new docs things at Solana Foundation for the Solana docs. So I'm always in the market for new docs opportunities.
Man, I miss the old docs. They were so near and dear to me.
I hated them.
I went to the Solana docs recently to pull up what used to be my favorite page, and it was missing, and it made me sad.
What page was it?
I used to always refer everyone to the accounts page. I think it's called account model. Yeah, I'm on it now. It's just different. There was this page that had a list of, I think it was 5 rules for Solana programs and account access. And it was like the Bible. It was a like on-chain program developer's Bible, because those 5 sentences contained like so much information that you didn't realize. And so I used to refer people to that a lot. It's just not there anymore.
Yeah, it got removed like probably 2 or 3 months ago, I'll be honest with you.
Oh, it was that recently? Okay.
Yeah, it was fairly recent.
You know the section I'm talking about though, right?
Yeah. Well, so the problem with things like that is like, this is one of the problems I have with a lot of documentation sites, including the Solana core docs on Solana.com, is that there's always like really useful nuggets that are sort of scattered, but they're really hard to find unless you know where to go. And specifically, those useful nuggets, almost no one recognizes how truly useful they are until you're so experienced that you're never going to look at the docs again. So it's like this trade-off that documentation maintainers end up having to make is where to put that, where to surface this information in like the best place and the best way for where the reader is currently at. And like most readers are not at that advanced level. So I think like all this account stuff is moved to like a different section maybe. It was very prominent because it's very useful, but no one got it. And it just added complexities too quickly for a lot of people, so they would fall off really quick.
I can see that. It was that section of the page, like soaking that in. You're right. It was complicated and it didn't help a beginner, but it stuck in my head so long that it's it's what helped me truly understand how things work. And I think that is a problem with devs, is not understanding like the low level. Like even just recently, I had a discussion on Twitter with Noah and Toli about how a program can update an account it owns LAN ports directly. It doesn't have to use system program to transfer anything. If the program owns the account, it can debit the LAN ports directly, as long as it balances by incrementing the LAN ports to any other account. So like little nuanced things like that, like a program dev.
I did not know that until...
I haven't thought about that, but yeah, that does make sense that it would be able to do that because of like the understanding I have of the account model and the runtime. It's just like, that checks, but I wouldn't have thought about it before.
Yeah, and it's powerful when you're building things to be able to do that and to know that. Because if you take another step and think about it, that's all the system program's doing. And it's only allowed to do that to programs it owns. You can't send the system program's transfer instruction on an account that's not owned by the system program.
Yeah. That's there's another fun fact that I like to point out to people. So like if you look at most transaction, just about every single one will include the system program as one of the programs that are required. And in fact, it's not always required because the runtime handles the fee deduction that doesn't involve the system program at all. So some people will include the system program taking up those 32 bytes for that address when they don't actually need to. So that's a fun fact I like to point out to some people.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, because if you don't call transfer, like if you're not transferring LAN ports around, there's no need for the system program.
Yep, but people will still include it because like, they think the fee deduction happens on the system program. Nay, it's the runtime. It don't care about the system program.
Yeah, it makes it real hard to track sol balances in real time when things move things without the system program. Yeah, I have this problem.
I bet you do.
If anyone has this problem, it's you. Yeah.
We track the before and after sol balance of every account on Solana in real time. And I have that historically.
You asked this question, had this conversation on Twitter because you were like, why are these balances changing?
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's complicated. Yeah. And voting makes it even more complicated. Like, there's so many vote transactions at the same time. We ignore those, but
I bet I would.
Technically that makes our balances wrong. Don't tell anyone.
I mean, it's an edge case. It's an edge case accounts, that you're not willing to handle. Yeah, it's for validator accounts. Exactly. And a validator is probably not going to the step dashboard to be like, show me my historical transactions. Like, you're kind of effed if validator wants that.
Validator account is also using that same account for DeFi stuff. It's like
they're wrong.
They shouldn't be doing.
Don't do that. That's the worst thing you could possibly do.
Yeah.
Except for committing your keys to public Git repos. That's probably worse.
I have no doubt that is existing though. I have no doubt someone running a validator is also trading in DeFi.
Using the same account. Yeah, that seems like a terrible plan. And I respect saying that's an edge case we're not going to handle.
Exactly.
I like it.
Awesome. Well, Dana, before we wrap up, is there anything that you want to tell the listeners directly? Last minute shill, encouragement, guidance of some kind, just anything.
Oh, yeah. If you're getting started out as an engineer, spend the time to really learn this account model on Solana, what a PDA is, what get program accounts means, what's a discriminator. You're going to have to go low level. The answers are all down there in the low level code. Even if you're just doing React TypeScript type stuff, to understand how a Git program account works and understanding the distinct discriminators on a program is so valuable for reading your program and understanding the state of your program. Get low level.
Get low level.
I like that.
It's funny that I have a history of tinkering on Arduino And that's what programming on Solana reminds me the most of, because it's that low level C constrained environment where, you know, the chip only has 4K of RAM.
You mean to tell me that the Solana core engineers have a lot of experience with embedded programming?
Imagine that.
These constrained environments? That's crazy.
It's true. That was my biggest experience. Like, that helped me the most. Experience with Arduino. So if you're an Arduino tinkerer, get into Solana. You'll get it.
That.
Nice. Cool, man. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This was
thank you so much, Dana.
Chat, super informative.
Yeah, absolutely.
Loved hearing about your background and sort of how you got into the space and what made it, you know, interesting to you. To the listeners, thanks for being here. We'll see y'all next time.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
All right. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Solfate podcast. I hope you liked it. I know we did. We always have a blast recording with our amazing guests. If you've got a moment, please leave us a review in your podcast app or subscribe on YouTube. And I guess it's time to get some more coffee and get back to work.